Welcome everybody to this lesson, comments, colors, and backgrounds. In this lesson, we are going to be looking at what comments are, uh, why do we need them in our code, and talk about how to define colors and what backgrounds are and how we use them in our code. So comments, uh, the first thing we need to know about comments is that it's used to generally explain your code. There are so many times, and I can't tell you how many, where you would come back to a code that you have written a long time ago and then not know exactly what you were trying to achieve. And so it's always good to comment your code out so that when you come at a later date, you would be able to understand what exactly you were trying to do. So that's what comments are, and you should form a habit of just commenting out your code every time you write a block of code or a block of logic. Anything that you do is it's always advisable to comment it out. The browser always ignores the comment, so it's not gonna process your comment or display it or anything like that. It's simply for understanding your code, right? So this is the syntax that we would use. So it starts with backslash and a star, and then your comment line, and then you end with the same uh, slash and a star. Right, so this is the syntax that we are gonna be using. We're also gonna be looking at colors, right? And we'll be looking at some of the ways that we can define colors for our elements. So we're gonna be using predefined color names. We have the RGB color scheme, the hex, the HSL, RGBA, and Hsla. So we're gonna be talking about this a little more into detail. And then finally, we'll be looking at backgrounds. And in this one, we are going to be talking about how we're going to use backgrounds to affect our elements, right? So we're going to be looking at the background color, image, background images, background repeat, and background attachment. And finally, we're going to be looking at the background position. So let's start coding, and then we are going to explain each of the things that we have discussed here. So let's start by having a simple HTML, right? So we have our doc type, we have our HTML, we have our head, and then we have our body. And in the body, they just have an H1. This is an what are we gonna write here? Example, right? And then maybe we need a paragraph, but I don't know what we use it for, but let's just have a paragraph and we're gonna have some lorem. Okay, so if I refresh this page, we have this, right? So let's add some styling to this. So we're gonna do the internal styling, which is having your styles in the head section under the style block. So I'm gonna create a style block and I'm gonna put in here. I'm going to style the paragraph. I'll say I want my paragraph to have a color of blue. Right. Okay. So then if I refresh this, you can see that the color of my paragraph is blue. Right. So to add a comment here, let's just use the syntax that we learned. We have our backslash star. Okay. And then we put whatever comments we want to write in it, right? So I'm gonna say this is our first comment, right? So when I refresh this, you can see that the browser ignores the comment, it doesn't do anything with the comment, right? And you can have the comment even on this line, simple, same format, and then this is color, right? So you can have this. So basically, this is how we comment out our code. We can have multi-line uh, comments and then single line comments. So what we have here is an example of a single line comment. If I wanted to have say something like another example, you can go multiple lines if you want, right? So you can have it this way and have a multi-line comment. So you can always look at it as you code along, you would want to take the opportunity to just highlight what the code is doing or what the idea or the functionality that you are trying to create with your code. And just so we don't get this confused with commenting HTML, with HTML, this is the syntax, right? You're going to have this as your syntax, right? And then you can put in the comment, right? This is the body, and I don't see the opening body, so let me just revert it first. Okay, so I commented this out, so let me do this. Yep. So in here, I'll just say this is in the body of the HTML. So this is the difference between having a CSS comment and an HTML comment, right? So this is just FYI. So let's talk about colors. Colors are specified using predefined color names. We can use RGB, Hex, HSL, RGBA, Hsla, right? And we're going to look at a few of that. So let's try and do it with color names, right? And we've already talked about a few, right? So in here, when we try to color the paragraph, we said we want color to be blue. So this is a predefined color name, right? So let's just have an example where we have a few more in our body. Let's create, and I'm gonna just create some space beneath here. Okay, and I'm gonna have another H1, and in here, I'm gonna style this, and I'm gonna set the background color, and you can already see the predefined color names showing here, right? So if I choose brown, this is gonna set the background color of this H1 to brown. So I can just say brown, right? So if I refresh this, you can see brown, right? So this is one way that we can use color. We can set color, right, by just using predefined color names, right? We can also use, and I don't know if we should talk about the background color next. No, instead, what I would rather do is to talk about the border, using the border, right? So I'm gonna create another H1, and this is the border color, right? And I'm gonna style this H1. I'm gonna style this similar to what we did previously. I'm gonna have the border, and I'm gonna set the value to 2 pixels, solid. And the color here, I'm gonna say tomato. So again, this is a predefined color, right? So I select tomato, and then when I refresh this, you can see that there's an H1 with a border that is tomato in color, right? So that is an example of what we are talking about. So the next thing I want us to do is to use uh, Rgb, Hex, and Hsl, right? So, so the first thing I want to talk about is RGB, and RGB means red, green, and blue, right? That is the color, the primary colors in additive color synthesis, right? So it's about how do we mix these primary colors to form new colors. So the each of these colors are coded on 256 levels, meaning that it goes from 0 to 255. So for example, black is gonna correspond to R being 0, G being 0, and blue being 0. And then that gives you the black color. And then the white color is gonna be R being 255, green being 255, and blue being 255. So generally to get any color, you have to have the mixture of these three primary colors and then to constitute the color that you want. So we are going to take a look at some of this, right? So instead of brown, what I'm going to do is, oh, maybe let me just copy this again, and then I'm going to do this so that I can use the same code. I'm not gonna use the predefined color format. I'm gonna use the RGB, and this time I'm gonna have my RGB, and I'm gonna put 255 99 71. So my red is gonna be 255, my green is going to be 99, and my blue is going to be 71. So when I refresh this, I have this color, right? So normally if you are looking for a specific color, you can go online, just look at color pickers and then choose the color you want, and it's going to give you the color uh, in RGB, right? So you can see the number for each of the primary colors, R, G, and B, right? So this is RGB. So the next one that we are going to look at is hex. So the hex is just a hexadecimal way to represent color, right? So whether RGB format or anything like that, we can represent the same color using a hex number. So an example of that would be, uh, let us create another H1, and then I'm gonna say hex, and maybe I should have said RGB here just to show. Good. And then instead of RGB, I'm gonna put a hex, and I'm gonna use the hex value, which is 6 characters, FF6347. Okay. And then if I refresh this, you can see the hex, right? And it's the same color as the RGB. So that is the hex value, right? Now the there is one more hex that one more RGB that we refer to RGBA, and this adds an extension. This is an extension of the RGB color scheme with an alpha channel which specifies the opacity of the color. So it's like the transparency level of the color. So just as an example, let's have and maybe I should put it close to the RGB so we can see the difference. I'm going to copy this, and paste it down here. So the RGBA is gonna be the same, but it's gonna have the transparency, which is from 0 to 1. And then I'm gonna say, okay, if I put 1 here and I refresh this, you can see that it's the same color. It's like no transparency. If I put in there 0.5, I'm literally saying that I want it 50% transparent. So this RGBA value, the A value just sets the alpha value, which is the transparency level of your RGB color, right? So that is what that is. The next one that we want to look at is the HSL. Simply put, HSL stands for hue, saturation, and lightness, right? So it builds on the RGB model by adding saturation and adding brightness or lightness to your color, right? And then we have the HSLA, which also adds your alpha, which is the transparency to your color. So we are going to take a look at a few, and all these color formats can easily be Googled, and you can find exactly what color you're looking for without having to memorize or know each of them by heart, right? So you have the color picker, and it tells you exactly what color you can use, or what the format is for the color that you desire. So let's take a look at the HSL. So I'm gonna create another H1, and in here I'm gonna define it as HSL, and I'm gonna define this. So instead of having the hex, we're gonna do some HSL. So I'm gonna have HSL. So my hue is gonna be 9, saturation at 100%, and my lightness at 64%, right? And I don't need this. Okay, I do need it. So if I refresh this, I still get the same color, right? So then I can create another one, but this time for the HSLA, right? So this is HSLA because it has the alpha, and that's going to tell me my transparency, right? So I'm going to put a transparency of zero point 0.5, right? So if I refresh this, you can see that it's exactly the same as this RGBA value, right? So this RGB value that we have already talked about, like I said, stands for the red, green, and blue, right? And each parameter in this case, which is red, green, or blue, defines the intensity of the color, right? And like I said, the intensity is between 0 to 255. So, for example, RGB of 25500 will display red because red has the highest value, which is 255, and everything else has 000. It means if you are mixing the colors, you're going to take 255 of red and 00 of green and blue. So you're going to have red, right? To display the black color, you're going to have 0 of each red, green, and blue, and you're going to have black, right? So that is RGB, and this is just for reference, right? So we have the RGBA again, and the A, like I said, is the alpha, and this is the transparency of the color. So 0 is full transparency, 1 is not transparent at all, and midway is some percentage of transparency, right? As we have discussed. So that is RGBA. Hex again, and this is just for reference because I already talked about it, but I just want us to review it. So hexadecimal color is defined with the hash RR, which is the first two is red, the second two is green, and then the third two digits will be the blue. Where R is red, G is green, and then the last two is your blue, right? So in CSS, normally a color can be specified, and most of the time you see a lot of people using the hex value in their HTML or CSS, right? So it's just a different format from RGB, where it's encoded into a hexadecimal number, right? So is always the same as using 0 to 255, but this is encoded into 00 and FF, right? Between 00 and FF. So, for example, if we have a hash FF 0000, we are going to have a red, right? Because FF is the highest value of your first two digits, which is for red. And then we have zeros all around. So you're going to have 0 for green and 0 for blue, right? So you're going to have a red color, right? So if you want to know more about how to convert, you can look into it. But in this lesson, we're just trying to show you what these uh, color schemes look like and how we can use them, right? So those are the color schemes. The final one that we talked about was the HSL. And the HSL again stands for hue, saturation, and lightness, right? Where hue is the degree on the color wheel, like from 0 to 360, where 0 is red, 120 is green, and 240 is blue. And then we have saturation is a percentage value, right? 0% means a shade of gray, and 100% is a full color. And lightness is also a percentage, right? And 0% is black, 50% is neither light or dark, but if you have 100%, that is white, right? So you can mix it and then you have what we have. Normally, you can always get these values just by searching for it, the color, and then just picking it using a color picker, but that is what it is. Again, you can have an HSLA, and the A is also the alpha, and then you can have a percentage of transparency in your color. Okay, so that is your colors. So now let's look at backgrounds. So the CSS background properties, I used to add background effects to elements. So we're going to take a look at a few. The first one that we are going to look at is the background color, and this specifies the background color of an element. So we're going to just look at the first one is the background for the body of this HTML. So I'm going to specify the body, and then I'm going to add the background color, right? And then I'm going to set a value as light blue, right? So if I refresh this, you can see that now the background color for the body element is now light blue. Again, like we said in the color, we can use any of the other color schemes like the hex and all that to define this, right? So we have our background color being a background of whatever element, HTML elements that we have specified, right? We can have the is an opacity level that we can add to the color, the background color, that's gonna tell you how transparent that we want this. So you can add an opacity of 0.3, right? And so when I refresh this, you can see that it gives you some form of transparency on this, right? So if I go a little higher, you can see how it changes, right? And it takes a value from 0 to 1, right? The lower the value, the more transparent it is, right? So if I have an opacity of 1, what I'm saying is I don't want any transparency at all. So that is what the opacity is. Again, I could have used the Rgba or any of those ones that have the alpha value to specify the opacity, right? So this is one way that you can do it if you don't want to use the Rgba, sorry, or the Hsla, right? We can also have, so we also have the background image uh, property, which specifies an image to be used as the background of an element, right? So I'm gonna use and I have an image in my folder called water.jpg, and I'm gonna use that image as my background. So again in the body, and this time I'm gonna comment this out, and I'm gonna use the background image. Oops, what am I typing? Background image as URL, and I'm gonna specify the image that I want to be my background. So it's gonna be water.jpg. So if I refresh this, you can see that the background image is now my water, right? My tap, right? Which is the image that I have in my water.jpg, right? So that is the background image. The one thing that you should know about this, and the reason why it duplicates on the screen, is that the image is smaller than the page, the HTML page itself. So that's why it tries to reciprocate the image to fit the screen, right? If the image was big enough, it's gonna consume the whole screen, right? And that's why we have that. By default, the image or the background image repeats horizontally and vertically. That's why you see that the image has repeated horizontally and vertically, right? So if we wanted to only allow it to repeat horizontally, we can do that. And the way we do that is to add the background repeat property, background repeat, and say I want this to repeat only in the X direction, right? So when I refresh this, it's not gonna repeat vertically anymore. So it's only horizontally. So that's what the background repeat does. You can also set it to, if you don't want it to repeat, you can only set it to no repeat, right? And it's only gonna have the image. You see how small it is? So that's the difference. If you want it to repeat Y, you can also set it to repeat in the Y direction. So that is what the background no repeat does. Then we have the background position, right? And here you set the position to wherever you want it to be. So if I want it to be in the top right corner, I can set the position, and maybe I have to type everything, background position, and then right top, right? So now if I refresh this, you see that the right top hand side of the element, in this case it is the body, right? So we can set it to the right top, right left, any which way that we want, right? So that is background. You can look at some more examples and just try it out yourself. Just see if you can add some backgrounds to your elements and all that, right? So normally, if you want, you can have a shorthand to write the background, right? So if you wanted to have like a single line of text to do all of this, what you can have is you can just have your background without just the background, And the first thing you have might be just your color, right? Then you can have your URL, which is your background image, right? In this case, it's gonna be water.jpg, and then I can say I don't want it to repeat, so no repeat, no repeat, and then you can set your right top, right? Sorry, right top, all in one line, right? So this is just a shorthand that you can have used to achieve everything that we have already discussed, right? So we talked about the background color, image, position, repeat, and all that, right? So this should be enough for us to have some basic understanding of uh, colors, backgrounds, uh, and comments, right? So thank you guys for watching and see you guys in the next lesson. Bye bye.